Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host of my new podcast, Pause and Rewind. I'll be chatting to changemakers, thought leaders, and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now. But how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now. Because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes, and what makes our guests tick. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey there, and welcome to this episode of Pause and Rewind. And can you believe it? This episode marks a whole year since Pause and Rewind launched back in April 2024. On the 22nd of April, my first episode was with Raga de Silva, and I launched during Lesbian Visit Really Week with 5 back-to-back episodes featuring some truly phenomenal queer women from across the LGBTQ plus community who are out there showing up in the world and making a difference. I cannot believe that this has been a whole year. But the time of recording this, that this is going out, I will have done my live in person with an audience podcast recording with Charles Bailey, and that episode is due out next week. But I am so, it's quite a surprise that it got to this point. I don't always stick at things. I do find it difficult, but these stories, I've just a whole year of hearing people's incredible origin stories, the impact that they're having on the world, the way that they're showing up in their own unique way, um, and it's been amazing. I've got to chat to people that really inspire me. One of the reasons of launching this podcast was quite selfish. I wanted to chat to the people that inspire me, and inspire inclusion in me and others. And so, yeah, this is a special episode. So it's 21st of April. It's the start of Lesbian Visibility Week 2025. And I am chatting to Natasha Devon. I think Natasha is so smart, so brilliant, so thought-provoking in the way that she does what she does. Natasha is a mental health activist and advocate and campaigner. She is a broadcaster, journalist, and writer. She hosts her own LBC show on a Saturday evening from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we talk about this, and we talk about the way that Natasha deals with the big topics in society, particularly on her show, which is often labeled as the woke hour, and to which she has a brilliant retort. We chat about Natasha's origin story, and how she has branched into so many different avenues, and how she uses all of those to educate and brings people along in terms of their awareness and education. But we go into some great topics here. This is a fantastic episode. Enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Here it is. Cheers. Hey there, Natasha. Welcome to Pause and Rewind. I am so grateful to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I always start with a big question, and that is, what does the world look like for Natasha Devon right now?
Okay. Well, I mean, I should probably put a disclaimer and say, like most people listening, I imagine the world generally looks like a bit of a Orwellian hellscape. And as much as, I'm sitting here and I'm recording this and I'm safe right now, and for me personally, everything's okay, it is difficult to, get through sometimes day to day. But that aside, what I'm actually doing with my time is I spend most of my weeks in schools and colleges. I work with teenagers aged 13 to 18. And the way that I work is I do focus groups with those teenagers. I ask them what's missing from their personal health and social education, what lesson they would love that they didn't get, or if there is something that they were taught about, but they wish they'd been taught about it in a slightly different way. And then based on their responses, I have this team of experts in neuroscience and the social sciences, and I come up with these lesson plans and I take them back into schools and I also share them with charities. So that's pretty much, what I'm doing during the week. And then at the weekends, on Saturday evenings, I have a show on LBC, 6 to 9 p.m., sometimes called the Woke Hour. Um, which annoys me because it's 3 hours. It's 3 hours of wokeness, and
Yes.
people should know that. And I do a little bit of political campaigning as well, and I write books and articles. So there's lots of different threads to my career. But what I'm trying to do is to put the experiences and the feedback that I get from young people at the heart of everything, and give them a kind of representative.
And singing, I discovered on doing my
Yeah.
research of you, and singing as well, so many different hats. With those conversations with young people, what are the most common themes that you find are coming out?
Well, my most popular talk that I do is one which is about transitions, and specifically the transition from sixth form or college to whatever's next, whether that's
Mm,
uni or whether that's work or an apprenticeship or whatever. I think that a lot of young people are really nervous because they're so aware of what the world is like right now and how hyper individualistic and competitive it is, and the harshness of it, really, that when they're taking their first steps out into, I guess, what we would call adulthood, there's a lot of trepidation around that. There's that I'm getting from them. I mean, one of the things that I'm really wanting to challenge at the moment is in the media, there are all of these headlines. I'm sure you've seen them. There was one that said 52% of Gen Z want to live in a dictatorship. Absolute bunkum. Like the media really took that and ran with it as well. They're endless kind of broadcast hours and column inches that were dedicated to discussing, why do more than half of Gen Z want to live in a dictatorship? And there's a brilliant Substack that I follow by a guy called Dr. Mark Pack, who he talks through how they skewed that data. And actually, King's College London have since done a much more scientifically robust study into Gen Z, and it's about 6% that want to live in a dictatorship, right? Which is a statistically significant difference between
mm,
52% and 6%. But there is this narrative that exists around Gen Z, particularly the boys and the young men, that says, they're all really right wing. They all love Andrew Tate. They all love Farage and Trump. And whilst that is true of, I would say, on my travels, about 1 in 10 of them,
okay.
it's not true of the majority. And I just think that we need to give, young men a different narrative and a different label, because otherwise we're demonizing them, and that, never ends anywhere good.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've been working in events for a long time, and I've done a lot of events around violence against women and girls, and better education for boys and young men is something that comes up again and again and again as the foundation for a lot of what we're seeing. Um, I would love to know what you are taking forward, like in terms of coming up, in terms of what that looks like in tackling that demonization.
Well, I mean, I think that it's giving boys and young men a sort of different blueprint of masculinity to aspire to. And I think it's more than role models. I think role models are important,
Mm,
but I think it's more asking them, how would you like your generation to be defined? When we think about you, how would you like us to think about you? I read a brilliant book recently by Sam Delaney. It's called Stop Shitting Yourself, which
I
is
love
it's a
that.
great title,
What a
isn't it?
title, right?
Um, but he talks about how, these things that have been assigned as male qualities, like strength. He's like, that's not a male quality, that's a human quality. And the same thing with, courage, resilience. These are not inherently male qualities. And he's saying, we need to take away this idea that there's a female way to be and a male way to be, and just say, it's really important for human beings to be kind, self-aware, collaborative, philanthropic, creative, all these wonderful qualities that human beings can be, and encourage or ourselves and others to be good humans. And I think that's what it looks like, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You started off by saying, describing the world right now as an Orwellian hellscape. That's one
Mhm.
of many ways people have used of terms used to describe it. I've heard like shit show, fire pit, all kinds of ways. And I think you're right. I think that if we can encourage everyone to show up and stop this individualistic kind of mindset and break down any ideas of the manosphere or patriarchy or whatever, the world will just be such a happier place. You are someone who is not afraid to take people to task, whether it's on LVC or social media. Is that something that has always come quite naturally to you? Because I know for someone like me who does like to show up for not just my community as part of the LGBTQ plus community, but women in terms of my male allyship, whether that's understanding around menopause or violence against women and girls, it's a voice that I had to find in my own time. Is that something that always come naturally to you, or is it something that you had to develop?
No, I've always been really gobby. But I think what I have had to learn is how to harness that in a
Right.
way that is appropriate, and also to examine my feelings. Like, I'm quite a fiery person, and
Yeah.
sometimes I get really angry, and I don't take the time to examine, okay, why am I angry about this? What specifically is making me
Yeah.
angry? And therefore, what is an appropriate response? So I think for me, it's been learning to take that fieriness and use it as a resource, as opposed to kind of letting it drive me.
Yeah. I always talk about this in terms of my own being a work in progress in the world, respond versus react. And it's something
Yeah.
that I do not always get right.
I know you know none of us do. I mean,
No,
I'm
yeah.
sure that there is like there are Buddhist monks that have have got complete mastery over every single feeling and impulse that they have. But for most people, it's a work in progress.
Absolutely. You do wear a lot of hats, right? Kind of like campaigner, activist, journalist, broadcaster, writer. How do you balance it all and stay sane against this backdrop of relentlessness that we're seeing in the world?
I think it's about being part of a community. I really do. I think what and you touched on it earlier, what's happening is we're oscillating between this kind of terrifying awareness of everything that's happening in the world, and then this hugely individualistic culture that we live in. So it's either I am one person alone by myself and the world is really scary, and those are the two kind of polar positions that a lot of people are occupying, but in the middle of those is community.
Yeah,
And I think, feeling like you are one part of a puzzle and that you're contributing to something greater than yourself is really important for human happiness, actually. And it's not like that there is one community that I'm part of, but, in particular, I'm in a WhatsApp group with other lefty women that work in media. And stop because we never get to meet each other because
yeah.
they always frame it in terms of debates. So, and the media is generally right leaning. So what you have is a right leaning host with, probably quite a hard right opponent, and then you're brought on to debate them, and you never meet other people like you when you're in media. So we were like, right, we're gonna a WhatsApp group just so we don't feel like we're going mad.
I love that. Who's in the WhatsApp group with you?
Gemma Forte, Marina Purkis, Nicola Thorpe, Ava Santina.
I love
You know
that.
all these people?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's some incredible names. I love that you've got a WhatsApp group and the 3 hours of wokeness on a Saturday evening. It is just, it's brilliant. It's so bouncy. It's really thought-provoking. And you do take people to task. I think that I find that you always try and educate people in a way that tries to bring people along to start with, though.
Yes. Yeah, I really do. I think it's because I'm of mixed ethnic heritage and I'm bisexual. I always feel like I'm a sort of bridge between
Yeah.
lots of different worlds. And so my first instinct is always to go, well, maybe there's some common ground here. If I can try and make you understand, why you're being a ball bag right now. Like maybe you'll have a moment of self-enlightenment. And then yeah, there's a point where I mean, to be fair, you'd be surprised how often that works. How often the
Yeah,
course. I
yeah.
never actually thought of it like that. you know,
Yeah,
but sometimes they double down, and that's when the ding dongs happen.
absolutely. I mean, listen, I've had it with my own family. So you get to a point where self-preservation just has to kick in.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're so aware, I think, that people are listening. So it's such a difficult line to tread, right? Because if I was talking to these people in the pub, let's say, I would probably spend longer trying to unravel, how they've arrived at the point that they've arrived.
Yeah,
But then you can't just let people get away with saying things when you know that you've got, 250,000 people who are tuned
yeah,
in and listening. You have to pick people up and go, well, no, it's not right to make a connection between these two things. And I think that that's part of what brings about the kind of combative element of it. But it's the right thing to do when you're having the conversation on a platform.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of platforms, I've busted out some wicked podcasts recently. I've been listening to a few of them. Firstly, loved the LGBTQ History Month episodes of The Bunker, covering heroes and villains. I thought it was so interesting, the people that were popping up on there. But also New Beginnings. Are you happy to
Mm.
talk a little bit about New Beginnings? Because I have found it really fascinating.
Me too. Yeah. So New Beginnings is it's a podcast by Bet No More, which is a gambling addiction charity. And it's specifically about women who are affected by gambling harms. And it was so fascinating to me because, I'm a mental health campaigner and I did my mental health training in an addiction clinic. So I do know quite a lot about addiction, but only really in relation to alcohol, other drugs and food. Those are the things that were dealt with in the clinic that I studied in. And when we think of a gambling addict, we always think of a man. That's the
Yeah.
stereotype. And yet it turns out that there are millions of women, literally millions of women throughout the country who are really struggling with this. And there's so much stigma attached to gambling addiction if you're a woman, particularly if you're a mother as well. That there's this just conspiracy of silence that exists around this issue. So that my kind of co-host on the podcast is a woman called Lisa Walker, and she is a gambling addict, and she was going to these Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and she said I'd be sat there and it would be just me and 20 men. And she said, there were certain things that I felt like that wasn't the right environment for me to be able to talk about everything that was going on with me. So she founded this thing called New Beginnings, which is a service specifically for women. And she's an incredible person, like the tenacity that she has to be able to have achieved that. And then we interview, various different women who have been affected by this. But I have learned so much doing that podcast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It just shone a whole new light on gambling for me because I've only ever known men who get
Yeah.
involved in gambling. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. How with the balancing so many different mediums, is there one that is a favorite of yours, or are you just happy to throw yourself in and do you have a strategic approach to how you choose things? Because for me at the moment, I'm kind of trialing, I've got my podcast, I'm doing a little bit of writing, I've got my event stuff, I've got my freelance, and so I'm kind of seeing what lands as kind of like a favorite thing. And I think I'm, a bit of pivot, bit of flex. What about for yourself?
I do like a podcast because I think it's an opportunity to dive into the nuance,
Yeah.
in a way that other mediums often don't provide. I think, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, that TV debates, I really wished I'd said no to more of them. And I'm saying that like, probably they raised my profile at the time and helped me to get to where I'm at to some degree. But what those TV debates do, particularly in terms of some of the talking points or the perceived talking points of the left wing, is they legitimize stuff that we were never talking about. Like, so the whole thing of children identifying as cats, right? That
Insane.
was never a thing. And yet it's become folklore now. People have
Yeah.
heard it so often that it's just imprinted on their brains. And I've heard people tell me quite, passionately that No, it's absolutely. There are children
Oh my
identifying
God.
as cats, and you have to talk to them in meows, and they have to have litter trays in the classroom. Like just nonsense stuff. But this is what the right-wing media do, right? So they take a fringe thing that, they found on social media somewhere, and they go, oh, they're trying to ban Christmas. And then they invite you on and go, do you want to talk about why we should ban Christmas? And you're like, well,
Yeah.
no, not really,
Yeah.
because this is not a major concern of mine. Like, ban it, don't ban it. Honestly, I don't really care. Like,
Yeah.
you know. So I think that's my least favorite, probably that particular format.
Fair. And you're someone who's really fucking savvy, excuse my language, at pulling out the research to back up what you're saying about. But in those environments, research, evidence, proof just doesn't seem to matter.
It does, and you're so right, because what they're operating on is narrative and
Yeah.
feelings. And I have this quite often because I do love a statistic,
Mm.
right? And I don't want to bombard people with statistics, but I will pull out two or three statistics that will illustrate the main point that I want to make. And then the person on the other side of the debate will go, oh, well, put the books down and go out into the real world. And then you'll see, everyone on benefits is swinging the lead. And it's like, no, it's 2.7%. I
Yeah.
looked it up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean anything in the context of those debates. Yeah. And you feel, again, a bit like you're losing your mind because you think facts and reality. I'm in an environment where those things don't matter.
It's wild. It's wild. Um, Moving on to just before we jump into your origin story, I read Toxic at the weekend. I've got my copy just here, and
Ah,
I loved it. And I think read when I read this, and obviously with knowing what I know about your mental health campaigning and such, it all really fell into place. I could definitely hear your voice through it, and we had a chat just before we just hit record about yourself and the main character Luella and similarities in your growing up. Um, what was the writing process like for that? Because it was your first novel, right?
yes. So I'd always had it in my mind that I wanted to have a go at writing a novel. And then lockdown happened, and all my work got cancelled. And fortunately, by the second lockdown, schools had kind of gone, oh, okay, well, we can have Zoom lessons. So it picked up again by that point. But literally, it just went, no, no more work for you. And I'm self-employed, and so there was no, what was it called, the scheme where you could receive welfare
Yeah.
payments essentially. Yeah, I wasn't able to access that. And so I thought, well, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So, and I'd already had the idea of Toxic kind of bubbling in my head because it actually came from talking to some teenagers where they were talking about their RSE lessons and how they were being taught about things like red flags and emotional abuse and codependency. And they were like, great if in the context of a romantic relationship, but what if the
Yeah.
person that is manipulating and controlling you is your best friend? What would you do then? And I went, that's a really good idea for a novel. And so
Thank
yeah,
you.
I thought, yeah, I'll write that story. And it's important to say that Luella is not me. We're not the
Yeah.
same person, but there's definitely a lot of me in her, in the way that she, um, feels like a bit of a square peg, and she doesn't have the same interests as the other girls in her school. And I'm not Welsh, but I went to university in Wales, and so I made her half Welsh because I really wanted to celebrate Welsh culture throughout the book as well.
I love that. I mean, it was really great, and it was a great. I think it's a brilliant way to educate people on those red flags, on some of those issues. But it's also a really beautiful way that you finished it by talking about the fact that people are flawed. They're not bad. They're flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's the thing. And, we grow up being told these stories where there's a hero and a villain,
yeah,
and the hero is just heroic because they are, and the villain is just villainous because they are. And good always triumphs over evil in those stories as well.
yeah.
And the world just doesn't work like that. And I wanted to make the character who is toxic, Aretha, I wanted the reader to understand why Luella falls in love with her. I wanted her to be creative and fun and confident and sparky and and I kind of wanted the reader to fall in love with her a little bit because the people that are capable of manipulative behavior that you encounter in real life very often like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and
Oh, thank you.
I'm looking forward to the follow-up now. Natasha, I am so excited to dive into your origin story. Are you ready to pause and rewind?
Yes, let's go.
Here we go. Take me, take me back. Tell me all about little Natasha.
So I grew up in a tiny little village in Essex called Ugly.
I I know ugly.
Have you ever been?
Yeah, I drove through it a while back on my way to Sudbury. I'm from Essex as well, so I kind of
Okay.
know a little bit, yeah.
So all right. Yeah, so we most famous for having an Ugly Women's Institute,
I love it.
which I'm definitely going to join one day. Surely they can make me an honorary member, even though I don't live there anymore. And it even though I think Ugly is generally quite a kind of affluent village. I lived in there was a sort of row of council houses, and it's a lot of the Essex villages are like that, where they have one section. Um, and I grew up in like a very low income household, but all my friends had more money than me, so it's not like I came from a very, very working class family, but I wasn't completely immersed in that culture. So I remember when I was at school, that some of my friends had like a cello in their living room where the TV should be. um, and I was like, oh, this is good. So yeah, that growing up, I've always been really confident. Everything changed when I was about 8. My cousin died. I was really close to my cousin. We were more like sisters, really. She was a year younger than me, and she was my mum's sister's daughter. And Chloe, she's called Chloe, and Chloe was polar opposite to me. Like I was always running around, a little bit red in the face, like I would just dance for no reason. Nightmare, I imagine. Just really noisy singing. I was always starring in my own personal musical. Chloe, very sort of put together, very precise, quite picky eater, just very sort of contained and pretty, and we were just polar opposites. And then when she was 8 years old, she got a very aggressive form of stomach cancer, and she died. And if you look back at photos of our family, you can see it. You can see the trauma of it. Something happened to us, and you can kind of see the impact of it. Something sort of happened behind the eyes, is the only
Yeah,
way that I can describe it. And that's when I started to struggle with anxiety.
yeah.
So I still was quite gobby, but I was also anxious at the same time from kind of that point onwards.
That's such a lot to go through for your family, but for you as at such a young age. Do you remember what you thought about the world at the time?
My main feeling was that it was really unfair. I mean, it's so my brother was born at 25 weeks, 6 months before Chloe died. So he was almost 4 months premature. And he was in an incubator in the special care baby unit in the same hospital where Chloe was being looked after. And so I remember just being at that hospital. It's Adam Brooks Hospital in Cambridge all the time. I've spoken to my mum about it since, and she was like, "No, we weren't there all the time." But in my head, we were, living there
Yeah,
for that period of time. And I remember feeling just how unfair is this? A baby shouldn't be born really sick, and 8-year-olds shouldn't die. Those things shouldn't happen. And I remember being really angry about it as well, but also feeling like it wasn't okay to be angry because I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest out of all my cousins and my siblings. So I was like, right, I've got to be grown up and I've got to be helpful and not add to anybody's burden. So I think that's where the anxiety came from. It was this sort of unexpressed anger.
yeah. Anxiety is a lot for a young kid to go through as well, what was support like at the time? Bear in mind this was a different time in terms of awareness.
Yeah, it was the late 80s. It
Yeah.
was, yeah, mental health was not a thing.
No,
It
no.
wasn't considered as an option. I did start having panic attacks. And obviously, my mum noticed and she took me to the doctor. And the doctor diagnosed me with asthma because I was having difficulty breathing. And then when my inhaler didn't work, the doctor diagnosed me with allergies, just sort of not anything specific. Oh, she's just got allergies.
Yeah.
At no point did it occur to anyone that it wasn't a physical thing.
Is that something that you had to then carry into your teenage years? And I guess that had quite an impact on the social anxiety, that whole you're okay, you're the oldest cousin, you're the older sister, you're good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was I felt an enormous amount of guilt that Chloe died. And this huge responsibility to make my life mean something
Yeah.
sort of on her behalf, if that makes sense, and to never complain because no problem I ever had was as bad as,
Yeah.
what she'd gone through. So yeah, I think yeah, definitely that's something that I've had a lot of therapy to unravel that, it's okay not to be superwoman all the time.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you that it's probably massively influenced the Natasha we know now.
Oh yeah, yeah. And well, I want to big sister everyone. And
You see it, you hear it.
yeah. And I think grateful's not the right word. Obviously I wish a lot of those things hadn't have
Mm.
happened, but they have given me, a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where, yeah, a lot of my campaign work comes from, definitely.
Yeah, I can see it, and definitely the big sister, like the showing up for people, the way you care, actually, to be honest. Um, have you got any favorite anecdotes that anyone's shared about you from when you were growing up?
So I loved school. It was my favorite thing. And I know I'm unusual now in this regard, but I just find things interesting because they are.
Hmm.
So when I talk to teenagers now and they say, "Oh, like I hate maths because when will I ever use that?" I don't relate to that at all. I'm like, what do you mean when will you ever use it? Just learn it because it's interesting. What's wrong with you? But I know that they're more normal than I am, right? And
Okay.
I know that's a more normal thing to think. But I just used to be like, yeah, tell me about the life cycle of a frog. Sure. I never once thought, when will I use this? Is this applicable? And so yeah, I loved school and I loved reading, but I used to get slightly obsessed with certain things. And for whatever reason, when I was doing history GCSE, we were doing the Tudors, and I just got obsessed with Cardinal Wolsey.
Okay.
Because I decided that he had been treated very unfairly by Henry VIII, and that me writing essays about him was going to somehow like retroactively undo this historical injustice, right? And so my mum says, like, she'd be trying to have a bath, and I'd be talking to her through the bathroom door, going, I've just got to tell you this thing I've learned about Cardinal Wolsey. And she said, I learned more about Cardinal Wolsey than, than my mum learned in history in the whole of school.
Have you let it go now, or are you still on this mission?
I'm not sure he's as completely unproblematic as I thought he was at the time. Like, so yeah, I've let it go.
You let it go. So we're gonna ask, what were you like at school?
Yeah, so the school that I went to was outside of the catchment area. And it was slightly unusual because it was a state school. It was a comprehensive, but it was all girls. And there's now that I work in lots of schools, I know that there's only a handful of schools like that in the country.
Mm.
But it had a sort of grammar school energy. That's
Yeah.
how I would describe it. And I went to the open day when I was 11, and I said to my parents, "This is where I'm going." And they were like, "Well, you can't automatically get in there. Like you have to get in on academic merit. And even then, they can say no." And I'm like, "No, this is where I'm going." right? And my mum had to write a letter to get me into the school. And she used to wake up in the middle of the night, like sweating, going, "This letter isn't exactly right. I've got to edit it. I've got to rewrite it again." Right? But I did eventually because I had to take an exam, and I got 100%. I was the only person in my class to get 100% on this exam. And then this amazing letter that my mum wrote, and a combination of both those things meant that I ended up going to this school.
Phew.
And it was so right for me. It wouldn't have been right for everyone, but it was just the perfect environment for me. And yeah, I had a lovely time. I had a great time at school. I've got no complaints at all.
And did you, in terms of that, the anxiety that had developed, did that manifest at school? Was that something you were able to keep a control over?
I think it manifested in perfectionism
Mm,
and overworking. Again, my teachers were like, "She's asking for extra homework." She's asking for text to read around the set text. And my mum said, yeah, like she would go to parents' evenings, and my teachers would be like, "How have you done this? How have you raised this child?" She's just so interested in everything we have to say. But I think that looking back, that was probably me channeling my
mm.
anxiety into something, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Moving on to kind of teenage years, what was those formative years like? Obviously, massive kind of like adjustments, shifts in headspace, bodies. And what did you think the goal was at that point?
So I'm really grateful that, so I'm bisexual. So I went to an all-girls school, and I did have, like, I wouldn't say relationships with girls, but there was all the normal stuff of like
Mm.
kissing and hand holding and all of that. I never had a girlfriend when I was at school, but I was able to experiment in that way. So for that reason, I'm so glad that I didn't go to a mixed school, because I look now at the statistics around sexual harassment, etc. And I just think that would have made it really difficult for me to learn, and it would have made me self-conscious because, um, like, I knew I wasn't like hot. You know how you have the teenagers who are hot, and there's about five girls in our year who sort of peaked at school, really.
Mm.
But you don't see it that way at the time. You don't see it as a peak. You're like, oh, they're the hot ones, and they'll be hot
Yeah,
forever. And I was very aware that I didn't, I wasn't in that group, but it also didn't bother me in the slightest. And I think a lot of that was not having boys around me sort of constantly drawing attention to your physicality all the time.
yeah. And do you think that that experience means that you are all the more equipped to the way you show up around gender equality, right, is something that stands out around your work. Do you
Yeah.
think that experience of being at an all girls school is influenced by that?
It's so interesting that you asked that question, because I'm in a WhatsApp group with there was a group of five of us that used to hang out at school, and now we're all in a WhatsApp group together, and they send me pictures of their child's rashes and say, "Do you know what this is?" And I never know what they are, but I think they just want to show someone, so
Fair.
that's fine.
You're here for
Um,
it.
yeah, I'm there for them. But I was saying, because I just assumed we'd all have the same experience. I said, "Oh, isn't it great that, we went to an all-girls school, so there was no such thing as girl subjects or boy subjects. If chairs needed stacking or tables needed moving, we did it because there was no one else
Yeah.
there to do it." And I certainly emerged going, "Well, I'm not intimidated by men, because why would I
Yeah.
be?" And some of them had the total opposite experience, where they said they were just not prepared for how sexist the world was, and
Right.
they felt like really sheltered from it. So I think it can go either way with a single sex experience in schools. But for me, yeah, definitely, I felt like what I was taught at school was um, anything that a boy or a man can do. If you want to do it, you should be able to do it too.
So what was the goal?
So I never had a clear idea of what I wanted to do for a career right up until I left university. But, I emerged from university going, I'm still not really sure what I want to do. everyone kept telling me that I should be a lawyer.
Okay.
That was the thing, right from
Because of
primary
the
school.
because of the gobbiness.
Yeah, you'd be a great lawyer. And I thought, okay, it's in my teenage years watching Ally McBeal, I was like, oh, I look like
Obsessed.
it's wearing a mini skirt and standing up and fighting for what's right. I can do that. That seems like a good career for me. Um, so that idea was sort of imposed upon me, I would say. And then I did English at university just because that was my favorite subject, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to carry on studying it. Then when I came out, obviously had to get a job, and there was just like a kind of firm of solicitors in town, and I got a job there as a legal secretary, and then I ended up qualifying as a paralegal. But in like residential conveyancing, which is not wearing a miniskirt and standing up in court
No.
and fighting for what's right, and I absolutely hated it. But in a way, I'm glad that I hated it because it meant that I went, okay, that's clearly not right, and then
Yeah.
did something else.
And what did you do?
So, well, lots of things. There was a period where I was modeling. There was a period where I was writing for, various magazines and also writing for people who needed stuff writing for them. This was obviously a long time before Chat GPT. I was a human Chat GPT. But then because I still was experiencing mental health issues that were undiagnosed right up until my mid 20s.
Mm.
There came a point in my sort of mid to late 20s, 27, 26, 27, where I wasn't able to work because I was too sick. And that was a reset moment for me. And it was after that that the idea came to start going into schools and asking teenagers what
Yeah.
they wanted in terms of a lesson on mental health.
Yeah. And how did was it is it 2002, are we talking early 2010s here, roughly?
It was 2008, yeah, when
2008 was
I
your first one.
first took my tentative steps
Yeah.
into a school, yeah.
What was that first experience like?
So I went back to my old school, and then we had a brother school down the road that was all boys. And I just said, and they still remembered me at that point. And I was like, can I come in and interview some teenagers? And they were like, yeah, sure. Like we know you, you're safe, it's fine. So I interviewed 100 teenagers in each school, and I was just asking them, what would you love a lesson on that you're not getting? Overwhelmingly, the girls said body image and the boys said exam stress.
Okay.
Back then, yeah, which were both, really new concepts at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. That has shaped so much of what you do now in terms of the books, what you talk about. What was the first break into presenting and broadcasting?
Um, so I think it was because I was talking a lot about body image and going into schools and educating on body
Mm.
image. Initially, I there was a time where I was sort of known as the body image lady.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember.
yeah. And so I was invited on, because back when we weren't living in the Orwellian hellscape that we are now, there would be these fallow periods in the year, normally sort of around August, where, all of the journalists are on holiday, really. And they're like, oh, we've got a program to fill. Let's have a conversation about body image. So that's how it started. The other thing I should have told you is I have always, always wanted to host a radio show. Because when I was a teenager, we had a Democratic majority rule vote on TV. We had one TV set, and I've got two brothers, so it was always Power Rangers. I've got no interest in Power Rangers. So I used to take myself up to my bedroom, and I had just like a little twiddly wireless radio, and I tuned into. I think it was LBC. I think it was a very early version when it was a London-based radio show that I would tune in and listen to. And yeah, I did a little bit of hospital radio at the time because I thought, wouldn't that be a great job? Just like being on radio and chatting to people about interesting stuff. So I had this thing where I was like, for about a decade, saying to LBC, can I have a show? And they were like, I tell you what, why don't you become a known voice on the station? Come on and talk about your areas of expertise. So I was talking about mental health, I was talking about young people, et cetera, et cetera. But I was just periodically bugging them about it. And then it just so happened that I bugged them at the right time. And and that's how the radio show came about.
That's amazing. How long have you been on LBC for?
4.5 years.
And has it flown by?
Yeah, it was weird because when I started, it was 2020,
Mm,
and that was in the pandemic. And it would not necessarily, not the first lockdown. The first lockdown was, I mean, James O'Brien was broadcasting from his shed, famously. There was no studio. But the second and third lockdowns, I was broadcasting in. And it was such a weird time. All of the conversations really we were having were about COVID. And there was a lot of strong feelings and anti-vax rhetoric and stuff to deal with. And so that feels so surreal to me that that first year doesn't feel like it fits in the timeline,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you've just carved this career that seems to really appeal to all of your different interests and passions and skill set. What advice would you say to anyone else that perhaps doesn't have a real clear idea of where they want to go? Because I think it's so common that we're supposed to have this one thing that we want to do, but I'm kind of in the same vein as you of I have so many different hats and so many different things I'm interested in.
Mm.
But I think that we are becoming a little bit more aware that people can do different things. How do you think that you have crafted it in such a way that works for you?
Not knowing what you want to do is an advantage, actually, when it comes
Yeah.
to this, because I think you can be so focused on a goal that you can miss the opportunities that are coming at you from the sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So don't be scared to not know, but equally, um, for me, there was the one foundational thing, and the one foundational thing for me was working with young people on not mental illness, but mental health. These adjacent universal issues like social media, like exam stress, like body image that we all experience that can impact our mental health. That's my thing. And
Yeah.
and it's the hub of everything. And then if you've got your kind of one foundational thing that is the thing that you need to do, as soon as I started doing that, I was like, oh, I need to be doing this. This
Yeah.
is where I need to be. Then that kind of gives you a grounding whereby you can go, okay, so, maybe there are other things here that fit broadly with I mean, I hate this word, but fit with the brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're not strictly this one defined path.
I often talk about this, I sit across diversity, equity, and inclusion and events, right? Which is actually quite a cool intersection to sit at because it means I get to inject a lot of my DEI stuff into my events output and create this brand as kind of like an inclusive events professional. And I really one of the things to talk about at DEI is when you have your knowledge base and allyship for one area, it's
Mm.
so much easier to branch out into your understanding and output and therefore action around other areas. And you see it with yourself, even the recent stuff that you are talking about on various shows and content around universal credit, on what people are going through now and the impact that's going to have on their mental health. So I think that's a really valuable lesson for people.
Yeah, it's you don't have to be defined. I mean, I did get really frustrated for a time because people will put you in a box, right?
Yeah,
So for a while I was the body image lady,
yeah,
and then I was the mental health lady. And then the thing that I would get a lot is I would be desperate to talk about political things because mental health is political.
it is.
Body image is political. Everything's political, right? Ultimately. And I would be desperate to talk about how policy is impacting people's mental health. And then the answer I would get from media or whoever or an event would be like, oh, if we're specifically doing an hour on mental health, we'll give you a call. And then what they'd want me to do is kind of listen to callers' questions and respond. And I'm like, no, I'm not an agony aunt. I'm not a therapist.
Yeah,
I'm here to advocate for
yeah.
people, and that does involve a knowledge of political stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember your slogan out of that. She is political, and that's correct.
Yeah.
The t-shirt. Love the t-shirt, and yeah, and again, just the way you do it is really powerful. It's really smart, and it makes it accessible to everyone. I think that's what your the way you show up is is for me. It's like you can the way you talk about stuff that I might not necessarily know about. It is a way that I can understand it as well. Is that something that you've honed in on and crafted over time?
I do like to help people join the dots,
Yeah,
where you can go, okay, I see your area of expertise and I see your experience. Let's see how this is relevant to other things. And it's a way of being that bridge. Because I remember having a conversation with somebody, it's about 2010, I reckon. And I was having lunch with this guy who I think I'd done a column on him for Cosmo or something like that. But it was a sort of, you seem really cool, shall we go for lunch thing? You know how sometimes you meet people and you go, I would like to hang out with you. And we were talking about tribes. And I said, I don't think I have a tribe. I think I'm always sitting slightly outside of the
mm,
tribe because I certainly feel that being bisexual, you're often overlooked within the
yeah,
queer community. Like, I can't tell you how many award ceremonies happen within the queer community where I'll look on Instagram and I'll be like, literally everyone I know is at a party and I'm not there
yeah,
because I just don't occur to people. I think being, largely white appearing, but of mixed heritage gives me sort of quite a unique perspective on things. And having mental health issues which are essentially an invisible disability, I don't feel like I'm really wanting to center my voice in any of those conversations. And so I said, it's quite lonely being tribeless. And he said, oh, you're thinking about this all wrong. He said, you're a bridge between worlds. And it completely flipped how I
yes.
thought of it.
Reframing that narrative of it for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite beautiful actually.
It was a real moment for me.
Yeah, and imagine something that if you're able to embrace that, then it's quite a powerful position to be in.
I think so. And it allows you to get over this idea that you have to be right in the eye of the storm.
Yeah,
It's like, no, you don't. You can help to bring people together. And that's, we've all got our role to play in the resistance, right?
yeah.
And I think that might be mine.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's sometimes how I feel in the circles that I feel on the periphery, right? As someone that focuses on events, which again
Mm.
is bringing people together, I sometimes feel like I'm kind of steering some of the conversation and the bringing together, but I'm not in it. I don't feel in it all the time. So that's
Yeah.
helped me personally, to be fair.
Oh, good.
Thank
I'm
you so
pleased.
much. Love that. Is there a moment that you look back on now that you thought was a failure at the time that has been the making of you?
Yes. In 2016, I was very briefly the government's first ever mental health champion for schools. And I lasted 9 months, and I was far too outspoken about austerity and Michael Gove's education policy changes, and it was embarrassing for them, so they fired me. That's that story. But whilst I was still this in this role, I did this speech at the Girls Schools Association annual conference. And I was talking about heteronormative assumption and how much damage it does if you're not inclusive in your language, and how easy it is actually to, just don't make assumptions
Yeah,
about the person in front of you or the group in front of you. And that will naturally affect your language. And literally, as I was on stage, this wasn't part of what I was planning to say, but I just thought, oh, I can give an example that's really relevant to this group. So I said, for example, if I was coming into one of your schools, I would not begin my talk by saying, hello, girls, um, because I don't know them all. And I don't know how they all, I don't know all of their genders, and I don't know the stage that they're at or anything like that. So I would just say, hello, everyone. I think that's a better way of beginning a talk. And I
yeah,
just thought that's a little bit of good practice that they can all take away with them. What I didn't know is that it wasn't just educators in the audience, there were journalists there. So afterwards, I get
uh,
taken into this little room, and there's journalists from, the Telegraph, the Mail, all the people. And they of course pick up on this and they start interrogating me about it. And I panicked because I thought this is going to turn into a trans thing. It's
Mm.
going to turn into another example of, they're going to say I'm part of the trans lobby and, that I'm trying to, and this ended up happening anyway, but,
Yeah.
I'm trying to impose a way of living on, the 99% of people who aren't trans or whatever. So I panicked and I was like, well, no, it's not just about trans people, is it? It's about the fact that if you're constantly reminded that you're a girl, it's not, language isn't just describing stuff, it informs how we understand stuff.
Yeah.
It's better to be human than to, have your gender constantly up front and center, because that can be restrictive, right? And they were like, well, what do you mean? So I said, well, the stereotype of being a girl is that, there'll be certain, you'll probably be more into humanities than you'll be into science and, all of this stuff. And I could like feel myself digging this hole for myself. And then of course, the next day I'm on the first 5 pages of every newspaper, 10-minute rant by Piers Morgan on Good Morning
Oh,
Britain about what a terrible human I am. And I was like, ah, shit. And and it did end up. They said that I had ordered teachers to ban the words boy and girl because it was offensive to trans people. That's of course the story that they ran. But
right.
they also said that I thought that girls should only be interested in humanities, not science, and like completely twisted everything I
Yeah.
said. And I thought, oh, I handled that so badly. But it did, that incident provided the foundation for pretty much all of my trans advocacy ever since. Because I was like, right, I'm going to be match fit the next time you fuckers do this, I'm going to be ready for you. So I went to one of my mates is a lecturer in gender. And I went, right, introduce me to some gender scientists, please. Because I want to know like what the science actually says about gender, how I'm supposed to use these words so that I'm being completely accurate. And it sort of made me put my armor on
Yeah.
for trans allyship. So it was actually a good thing in the end.
And putting it to how you show up is amazing. I would love to know about a lesson you've learned or a person that shaped you the most along the way.
The thing that I've learned is that there has to be a balance between letting things happen and making things happen. So if your philosophy is just let things happen, then other people are going to decide your life for you and you
Yeah,
won't end up in a good place. But if your philosophy is 100% make things happen, then, there's lots of stuff that's really unfair and unexpected that happens to you in life. And you're just going to end up really frustrated that you can't control everything. So I think that all the people around me, and I know some people who are just so philosophical and laid back about everything, and then some people who are so driven to carve out the exact life that they want. But I'm trying to be somebody who takes the middle path and goes, right, sometimes you got to let things happen and sometimes you got to make things happen.
absolutely. That's a really when we think about manifesting things, that's kind of like that's what manifesting is, right? It's kind of you have an idea, but you're not just expecting it to just appear out of the ether, but also you've got to work towards it.
Yeah, and I think that that's where the notion of manifesting, like everything, social media has kind of boiled it down
Yes.
to this ridiculous thing that's and also when you get people who are like nepo babies and they go, oh, my parents just gave me £5 million and then I manifested a business empire, and it's like, well, you didn't manifest it, did you? Like but it's kind of misunderstanding what that world is. It's kind of it's a place that you inhabit, isn't it, where you go, I control the things I can and I let go of the things that I can't.
For sure. For sure. When it comes to your voice in inclusion, right? Because you are someone that strives to make the world a more inclusive place through awareness, information, education. How have you learned to channel that voice?
It's really difficult to not speak on behalf of people, particularly when you're like me, when you're like, oh my God, it's so interesting. Like, because I find people really interesting as
Yeah,
well as stuff. And so when people tell me about themselves and their experiences, I'm like, that's so interesting. I'm going to tell someone else that. But you have to do it in such a way as you're not speaking on people's behalf. So I think inclusion is as much about carving out opportunities so there are platforms for other people as it is speaking yourself.
Yeah.
And that's been really difficult for me because I love to chat, and I also think because I'm a writer as well. Sometimes when I'm talking to my friends, they'll say something to me, and I'll be like, "Do you mean this?" And they'll go, "Oh, you've said it way better than." Yeah, they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly it." And
Yeah.
so I always think, "Oh, I've got this ability to say it in a way that will resonate with people." But I think sometimes I've kind of wanted to grab the mic a little bit too much, and actually inclusion is about going, "Look, here's my platform. You take it for a bit. Here's the mic."
Yeah. 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 Does happiness and success look and feel how you thought it might?
Um, I don't know that happiness and success is a destination. I think it's something that particularly happiness, it's something that you sometimes have access to and other times you don't. And it's okay not to feel happy or content all the time. I think there there have been moments where I'm like, oh, I've nailed this. Where because I think happiness is where you go, I am completely accepting of everything right now. I've achieved an equilibrium where everything's fine and I'm accepting of everything. And it lasts for about 10 seconds before,
If that sometimes.
life interrupts. So I think a lot of people, particularly in the Western world, where we're kind of indoctrinated into this sort of capitalist
Mm,
way of thinking, we mistake happiness for euphoria, and we think that it's about stuff, getting
yeah.
stuff, and we think it's about these moments like getting married. I'm married, and my wedding day was great. Don't get me wrong, really great day. Probably like not the best day of my life.
Yeah.
I would struggle to tell you what the best day of my life is, actually. But we pin, don't we, all our hopes and dreams on these moments.
Yeah.
And then we're disappointed when they don't feel the way that we think that they will.
I hear you. Marriage is exactly the same for me. I pinned marriage on fixing me. I pinned marriage on escaping the broken life that I kind of came from. And then it happened, and the magic it did not magically
Mm.
fix everything. What magically fixed everything, when it certainly didn't magically fix everything, what fixed things was getting to know myself better and learning to like myself.
Yeah. Because wherever you go, you're there. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh no, yeah, yeah, 100%. I really, really feel that really deeply that we are bred this, like bred into us that we need to have this euphoric, um, shiny lifestyle all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I went out to a school in Kathmandu in Nepal. And certainly at the time, it was very much still affected by the earthquake there. So all of the pavements are really uneven, and there were like telegraph poles hanging down right next to your head when you were walking down the road, and there'd just be a random cow that would come out of nowhere, and people on motorbikes with chickens on the back, and it's really dusty. And it was the most present I think I've ever felt because as you were walking around, you couldn't look at your phone. You couldn't put on a podcast. You couldn't listen to music. You couldn't even daydream, really. You had to be so hyper aware of your environment all the time. Otherwise, you would fall on a crack in the pavement or, bump into a cow. Um, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
here inhabiting my body. And the people that live there, you feel that like they're present and it
Mm.
radiates off them. And I just think that there's a lesson to be learned here in the West, we're always chasing the next thing and we never take the time to just be.
Yeah. My word for the year is savor because I'm
Mm.
constantly like, I've done that, I'm moving on, I've done that, I'm moving on. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. My final question for this segment is, looking back so far, what are you
Mm.
most proud of to date?
I am most proud of surviving, I think. Um, which I know that sounds bleak, but uh, there are so many, and I don't mean surviving physically. I don't mean I'm proud to be alive, although obviously I'm
Yeah.
very glad to be alive.
Mhm.
But I think surviving in terms of surviving experiences and coming out the other side and picking myself up and dusting myself off and moving forward with that learning. There are so many things that have happened where I think if they'd happened at a slightly different time or if I'd been in a slightly different headspace, they would have just kept me down forever. They would have ended me or broken my spirit in some way. And that hasn't happened. So I'm pretty proud of that.
The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day raid, and on a Saturday afternoon you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor. Are you ready for some quickfire questions?
Yes.
What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, the album.
I had a bootleg copy from the market when I was 15 and I absolutely love it still.
It might be the best album of all time. It's definitely in the top five, right?
Absolutely. Are you vibing with Dolce performing with Lauryn Hill? I mean, that was pretty incredible.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Dolce is amazing as well. She's phenomenal. And when I saw that collab, I was like, this is brilliant.
Yeah, when you're like, okay, this is happening now and I'm here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the saying you live by and one that you'd put in the bin?
Um, the saying that I would put in the bin is everything happens for a reason. It doesn't. You can apply meaning to it to everything, but not everything happens for a reason. And it's like, get over it. And the saying that I live by is kind of the inverse of that. And it's something that my mum says a lot, which is there's always a reason. And she's talking about it in relation to people. There's always a reason why people are the way they are. And it doesn't mean you let them off the hook, but
Yeah.
there's always a reason, right?
Yeah. Very much comes back to our earlier conversation about trying to meet people where they are and understand where that viewpoint, that behavior comes from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if they are, as you said, a ball bag.
Yeah. People are a bull bag. There's a reason.
Yeah.
Not an excuse, but it's a reason.
What's been the best adventure of your life so far?
I think it has been marriage, actually. I think you getting to explore this life with another human being and that, that constant thing where you're doing where you're sort of growing together and shape shifting and you don't become one entity. You're still very much two people, but you are two people that are connected in a way that I don't think you are. I mean, it doesn't have to be marriage, but any long-term relationship, you're connected in this very unique way. I was completely unprepared for how meaningful it would be, really.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. What three words would you use to describe you and your origin story?
A little bit much.
Do you feel a little bit much?
Yeah. Yeah, I know I'm a little bit much. It's fine.
You've embraced it.
Yeah.
I was literally talking to someone today about this that described their former self as too much, and I love being too much now. But it's taken me a long while to get there as a queer person, as someone who's a bit weird, as someone who's probably neurodivergent. It's
Mm.
taken me a while to get there.
And you'll be surprised as well how often your friends and acquaintances and family will go, oh, like 5 years later, they'll go, you were right about that thing. But you're
Yeah.
just a little bit ahead sometimes of people. I
Yeah,
find. So if you have a kind of faith, if you're a creative thinker, if you have a bit more faith in yourself, you're like, yeah, I'm just waiting for the world to catch up. It's cool.
that is. I'm going to get that tattooed on myself, Natasha. A little bit much. A little bit much. Love it. Let's fast forward a little bit. What exciting things do you have coming up?
I'm currently writing a book. I can't tell you that much about it, but it's a book for adults, which
Okay.
is unusual for me. Most of my books are for teenagers, and it's non-fiction, it's political science.
Okay.
So yeah, that's very, very exciting.
That's so exciting. What brings you joy?
Community brings me joy. It's and I definitely feel like and I think that this is true of the queer community, and I think it's true of my lefty women group that sometimes it all gets a bit much for you as an individual, and you go, oh, I've not got much fight in me at the moment. But the idea that there's someone else there who will pick up that baton and go, that's okay, babe, you have a rest.
Yeah.
I'll run with this for a little while. It's so reassuring, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It was actually Lady Phil when I asked her a question around community said something very similar, like that's some that literal example of a baton. And it's so important that we know when to pass it on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said earlier about being tribeless.
Mm.
Have you still found that sense of belonging despite maybe feeling tribeless or being that bridge?
Yeah, I think I do feel like I belong a lot more now. I think I underestimated perhaps how many people there are in the world who are like me, whose
Mm,
experiences don't fit neatly
yeah.
into a narrative that you could write about in a newspaper column.
Yeah. Yeah, it's everything, isn't it? It's the experience, it's the little bit muchness, it's the knowing that you're different. But then once you can embrace that and find the people that accept and love all of those things, you can find belonging.
Yeah. And it's you're a little bit different, but not so different that you can't fit in. I think that's what I struggled with actually for a really
Mm,
long time is that um I always felt like, oh, if I made more of an effort, I could fit in.
yeah.
I always think that it's like I've got a size 7 foot, right? So if shoes only went up to a 6, I'm like, well, I could squish my foot into that. I'd be really uncomfortable, but I could do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, fair. Yeah, no, I see. Yeah, I see it. Fitting in, adapting versus fitting in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a size 7, babe, so you can always come and borrow any of my shoes behind me.
Yes. Okay. I might take you up on that.
Do I've got my final question for you is this. Do you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for anyone out there to help them get to wherever they're going?
Yes, I do. Going right full circle back to where we started the conversation with, it's tough right now. It's hard right now.
Yeah.
Prioritize being in rooms with people who get it and with people who fuel you and nourish you, and you come away from spending time with them feeling grounded and strong and ready to go. Find those people and prioritize spending time with those people. Don't feel like you have to do it all overnight. Just one foot in front of the other. We got this.
I feel that. Natasha, I am so grateful for this time with you. Thank you for the way you show up for the queer community, for so many different people. Thank you for being a little bit much. And I'm very grateful to have spent this last hour and a bit with you.
Same. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for a really, really brilliant conversation. I hope that you enjoyed that as much as I did. And for me, what I'm taking away actually is relating to my career, and I hope many other people will take this away too, is that I have the anchor of my events, the same as Tasha with her work in schools, something that's really, really important right now when we think about mental health and, equipping and informing young people around issues around mental health, because, as Natasha shared from her own experience back in the 80s, 90s, and from my own experiences as well, it was somewhat lacking, and we've got more information now. So, preparing young people for mental health challenges is so important. But the way that Natasha has that as her main focus, and then branches out into these different outlets, so many different outlets, to inform the way that she shows up in the world, and uses her skills and her passion to educate people, bring them along on the journey. You talk about that a lot on this podcast. And yeah, that really resonated with me as someone that likes variety and getting involved in different things. Um, Natasha's retort to her show on LBC being called the Woke Hour, and it's 3 hours actually, just boom. Absolutely here for that. And the way that she deals with people, whether they're ball bags or not, always armed with information, the evidence. And I think that's really important as we tackle so many harmful rhetorics in society. I love the way that Natasha sees herself as a bridge connecting worlds, from her own experience as someone of mixed heritage and being bisexual, and not always quite feeling like she has a tribe, and seeing herself as that bridge connecting worlds again resonated with me. But I think it's really beautiful that she's found belonging with, and marriage being that adventure that she's enjoyed most along the way. And then finally, a little bit much. I think we should all be a little bit much. For me, being unapologetic as fuck is something that I try and live by. And I think that, hearing her talk about being a little bit much, and you know what, you probably are just a bit further ahead than you think you are, than other people can keep up with. So, embrace that, embrace the little bit much. Definitely a future tattoo for me. Thank you so much for listening. Lesbian Visibility Week, right? It's such an important week as we amplify and celebrate the voices and the impact of queer women. It's just a great week to dip into events, dip into content. So get involved in Lesbian Visibility Week, see what's out there. And I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Next week will be my final episode for this season. Then I'm taking a short break, but I'll be back for a short season for Pride. So stay tuned for more amazing guests on Pause and Rewind. Like, subscribe, share, do your thing, help bring these conversations to a wider audience. Thanks so much. See you soon. Cheers.